Hi everyone! This is the sweater I'll be showing you how to make. It's a cute, chunky autumn sweater. It'll keep your little girl really warm. It has this wonderful puff stitch that looks like a heart, so that's fun to learn how to do. And it has 3 buttons on a circular yoke. You will need 3 skeins of 6-ounce yarn. I like 100% acrylic yarn. I used a G-size hook, and you'll also need a yarn needle and some 3/8 inch buttons for the yoke. So come along with me and we'll make this great sweater to keep your little girl warm this fall. Okay, to start off with, do a foundation chain of 52. I've already done this, and for row 1, you will go into the 3rd chain from your hook and start doing double crochets. And you will do double crochets all the way down for your first row. And when you get to the end, chain 2, turn your work, skip this first one. That makes a straight edge every time if you chain and skip the first. And for this, throughout the whole yoke, you will only be going through one of the loops of your double crochet. Do you see that? Usually you go through both. And if it's easier for you to go through the back, go through the back. I'm going to go through the back. So yarn over, skip that first stitch, and then continue on with your double crochets, only going through one loop. And do 1 double crochet all the way down. Okay, so after that row, chain 2 and turn your work and skip the first one again, and go into the back loop again of your double crochet with another double crochet. And on this row is where you're going to start taking your increases. So let's take an increase on this very first stitch that we've made. Take another double crochet right into the same stitch that you just made. Go into the back loop, and then you will do 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3. And then this is where you'll take an increase again, and you'll just repeat this pattern to the end. Go into the same loop. Okay, so the pattern is increase, 1, 2, 3 double crochets, and increase to the end. Okay, so you've come to the end of this row. This is your chain 2 that you did at the beginning of the row. Don't forget to take a stitch into there, or else your edges won't be straight. So that's your final double crochet into your chain 2 space, your chain 2 that you did. So chain 2 again, and turn it around. Skip this first one, and you're going to repeat that row that we just did 2 more times. So a total of 3 rows will look just like this one. 1, 2, and 3. So I'll show you again what the pattern is. Skip the first one and do an increase in this first stitch. An increase is just when you put 2 stitches into one, or however many stitches into one to increase it. So there's your first increase. You will do 3 more double crochet and an increase. So far you've done 4 rows of double crochet. Now I said to repeat this 3rd row 2 more times, but I'll show it to you. So we've repeated it once more. So you've gotten to the end, you've taken a double crochet into the top of that chain 2 space, and you're not taking decreases at the end. So just a single space, chain 2, turn your work, skip the first one, and do 2 double crochets right into that first stitch. That's your increase, and then the pattern repeats again. 3 double crochets, and you're always working in the back loop, just like that. 3 double crochets and then an increase, 3 double crochets and an increase. Alright, so far we've done 5 rows of double crochet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So on this next row you'll chain 2 like always, skip the first one, and you're still going into the back loop only. Take your first increase right here, and then for the next 4 stitches you will do 1 double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. So 1, this is my second one, 2, 3, and 4. And then you will take another increase. So into the same stitch, take 1 more double crochet, and repeat that pattern. Increase, 4 double crochets, and an increase. So we finished 6 rows of double crochet, and this 6th row that you've done, you're going to repeat 2 more times so that there will be a total of 8 rows. And I've started the first one, just like we always do. You chain 2, you skip the first space, you take an increase in the first one, and then you will do 4 double crochets and an increase. And then when you get to the 8th row, this is your 7th row, you will do the same thing. So you're going to repeat this 6th row 2 times. Okay, so you just finished up 8 rows of double crochet, and the last row you finished was with your 4 double crochets in between every increase. The very last row you're going to do has 5 double crochets in between every increase. And there's just 1 row of that, and you'll start it the same way you did before. You start it with an increase, and then your 5 double crochets, and then an increase. Okay, so now is the point where we're going to start making the sleeves. So lay it down flat, and you can see as I've marked where the sleeves are going to go. It's going to be about 15 stitches down. You'll see as it lays out that it does flay out quite a bit, but that's so that the front of the sweater will be nice and have a nice gathered effect. So mark 15 down, or a little bit bigger or a little bit less, depending on how big of a child you're making this for. This will be for about a 12-month-old child. And then you will take your collar and fold it in fourths, and you will put 2 more pins right here on this side, and then you can also count down, but make sure you fold it into fourths and match it so that your sleeves are in the same spot. And where your pins are, put a piece of yarn through and tie a knot, and do the same right here. And once you've tied a knot on both of those, and we'll come back. Your last step that I gave you was to tie a knot where your pins were, and this is where we're going to start our sleeve. So just pull up a loop right where you tied your knot, chain 2, skip this first stitch and go into your next one, and this is where you'll be making your first puff stitch. So you pull up with your loop, probably about 1/2 inch. Yarn over, pull up a loop, that's your second one. Yarn over, pull up a loop, that's your third loop. Now yarn over and pull through all but the last loop. And now yarn over and pull through the last 2. Chain 1 and do another puff stitch. Pull up, that's 1. Pull up, 2. And you're yarning over in between each one. Pull up, that's 3. Pull through all but the last one. Yarn over and pull through 2. And there's your completed first puff stitch right there. Now yarn over, skip a stitch, and do a double crochet. There's no chain 1 in between that stitch. Yarn over and make another puff stitch right here. Chain 1 in between the puffs. 1, 2, 3, and pull through. Oops, I didn't get that one quite right. But you can see the pattern I'm doing. It is puff stitch, skip one, double crochet, skip one, puff stitch, all the way around till we come back to this point. Now when you come back around, this is how you're going to stop and start every row. This is underneath the armpit, so it won't really show, but this is where you will take your slip stitch in the top of your chain 2 space. And just do a little slip stitch. And then just like you did on the previous row, chain 2. So every row you will do a slip stitch on this stitch right here, and then build up again with 2 chains. And then you will yarn over, and you are going to start taking your double crochet in between your puff stitch, like that. And on top of your double crochet is where you will be taking your puff stitch. 1, 2, 3. And then chain 1 in between your puffs. And then take another one right there, and then take your double crochet in between right there. And you will do about 12 or 13 of these rows depending on how long your child's arm is. And this is going to be a big puffy warm sweater, so the sleeve is going to feel nice and full. So take about 12 or 13 rows and then we'll come back. Okay, after your 13th round, in your next stitch you will just take a single crochet, and that way you'll start to make the round come down like that. For the cuff, I chose to just do 1 single crochet into every stitch. If you want to make a longer cuff, you can do 3 or 4 rounds of single crochet. But as it is, I'm just going to do 1. And when you get back to the beginning, take a slip stitch on top of the first single crochet that you did, and then tie a knot, and then get your yarn needle and weave the end in the back, and then cut off your ends. So just however many rounds of single crochet that you want for the cuff. Now with the sleeves done, we're ready to start working on the bodice. So to make sure that we're working on the right side out, hold up your collar like this, and then the left front side is where you're going to be attaching your yarn. So just tie a little knot on the very last stitch right there, and pull up a loop, and then chain 2, yarn over, and skip this one right next to it, and in the next stitch is where you will take your puff stitch. So we'll come back after you take your first puff. Okay, so the last instruction I gave you was to do a puff stitch. So do your pattern that you were doing on the sleeves, but do it all the way around to the other side of the opening of the collar. So do your puff stitch, skip 1, double crochet, skip 1, puff stitch, but with no chain 1s up here. The only chain 1 is in between your puff stitch. Okay, so when you come to the very end, you're going to want to make sure you do a double crochet at the end so that your edges stay nice and straight. So do a double crochet, chain 3, because you're going to have to make that, that space go a little bit farther. So chain 3 on the edges, and you're just going to repeat this for every row. So you're going to go right in between your puff stitch from your previous row and make your double crochet, yarn over, and do your puff stitch right on top of your double crochet space. And then repeat that pattern all the way to the other end. When you get to the other end, do just like you did here, end with a double crochet at the end, and then chain 3, and then take your double crochet in between your puffs and your puff stitch on top of your double crochet space. Alright, I ended up doing about 14 rows of puff stitch on my sweater. You can do more or less depending on the age of your child. And before you start doing the edging, mark where you want your buttons to be with some pins. And I chose to have my buttons only on the yoke. You could do buttons all the way down if you wanted to, but this sweater is so big and puffy, I just thought that buttons on the yoke would be sufficient. And I'm going to do 3 little buttons. And so let me show you how to start doing the edging. You just chain 1 to turn your corners, and on any corner you're going to need to take an extra chain or an extra single crochet to turn the corner so it lays down nicely. And then just continue taking single crochets. It doesn't really matter where you put them on the edges, just as long as they're evenly spaced. I'm taking about 2 single crochets per row is what it's turning out to be. Do you see that? And then you're going to continue on all the way up and around, taking an extra stitch up at the corner neckline all the way around here, and then come to this point where your pin is, and then I'll show you how to do the button loops. Okay, so I've come to this corner of the neck. Take an extra single crochet into that same corner stitch, and then take 1 more single crochet, and then this is where you will do your chains for your button loop. So depending on how big your button is, that's how many chains you will do. And I'm going to do 4 chains because my button is about this size. So chain 4, skip a stitch, and go into the next one with a single crochet. And then there's your first button loop. Continue on with your single crochet. Some of these are hard to go through. Okay, so here's your next button loop. Chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, skip a stitch, go into the next one with a single crochet. And then you will do the same thing for all of your other button placements. And then can just continue on with your edging all the way around until you've come back to this starting point on the bottom of your sweater. And then you will stop it with a slip stitch right there and a knot, and you will hide the edges with your yarn needle, and then that's where you will end. So I've sewed on the buttons and I finished doing the edging, and this is what this finished sweater looks like. It's a great big chunky autumn sweater. It would look really cute in a brown or a gray, just a neutral color. But I hope you enjoyed making this sweater with me, and I hope your little girl stays nice and cozy in it. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.